Welcome or welcome back to Mystery Files, and I just want to say thank you guys, whether you want to be called Night Nation, Midnight Mafia, or the current frontrunner right now, which I encourage you to go in the poll and vote, is, I believe, Mystery Mob. Those are the three frontrunners, and guess what? I'm going to make a Patreon soon, and in that Patreon there's going to be tiers. And I decided, why not make it like Mystery Mob, Night Nation, Midnight Mafia? So it's going to be really fun, I promise you that. We are back, and this is episode number 2 of Hell Month. Now, we had a mysterious one last week. If you haven't seen that, I encourage you to go check it out today. Oh boy. Oh boy. To the sensitive stomach people and the people that just might not want to hear what Hell Month is about, might want to leave. Door left right now, because it's about to get intense in here. Okay, but let me remind you that there will be a hidden clue in here, and to find said hidden clue, when you do, put the timestamp of what it is in the comments to get into the giveaway. Now, you want to watch this one to the end, I promise you that, and we need to at least get this one up to 50 to 55 likes. We've been trailing behind, and it's not looking good, but I have faith in y'all. I believe in y'all. Let's go. So without any further ado, as of now, it's time to slip into a mind that's not our own. Let's go. Now, for those of you that have been there, the dockside suburb of Cross Hill is one of the meanest neighborhoods in Glasgow, Scotland. The air hangs heavy with despair and poverty, a reminder of the broken lives and dreams that have just faded away there. And crime runs rampant, and violence lurks around every corner. Edith McAlinden was one of the few who had managed to stay alive amidst it all. The 37-year-old single mother had been on the streets since she was just 10 years old, surviving through prostitution and petty crime while gaining a fearsome reputation in local pubs. Anyone who crossed her path often ended up on the receiving end of blind rage. I mean, Edith's wrath was swift and merciless. Her anger, a boiling cauldron ready to boil over at any moment. So let me take you to December 2003, and Edith had just been released from prison after serving a sentence for assault. Celebrating her newfound freedom, she headed down to one of her favorite bars with her boyfriend, David Gillespie, and local character Ian Mitchell, known as Pops. And as the night went on, they drank more and more until they were actually thrown out at closing time. But still in high spirits, no pun intended, they made their way to Ian's flat where, after a few more drinks, an argument broke out between Edith and David. Now, the mystery of what caused Edith McAlinden to snap has never been solved. Was it because of something deep and dark, or just an innocuous comment made by David Gillespie? We may never know. All we know is that Edith stormed into the kitchen and returned with a knife in her hand, and she went after Gillespie without warning. He seemed unable to respond. He was too drunk to comprehend the danger that he was in. So she raised the blade high before driving it into one of his thighs, and then she moved to attack his other leg. And her thrusts were so powerful that they sliced through flesh and muscle, reaching his femoral artery and sending him into unconsciousness from blood loss, as his life was now fading away. And then, without a moment's hesitation, Edith made a call. Her son, John. He was an easy target, a fragile 16-year-old living in a homeless shelter with nothing to lose. She summoned him and his friend Jamie Gray to come to Ian Mitchell's apartment without hesitation. So the cab that they got in arrived within minutes, and upon their arrival, Edith demanded that Ian go downstairs and pay the driver. And there was no arguing. Ian knew better than to disobey Edith's orders, especially after what he just saw. So he followed her command without question, while John and Jamie looked on in confusion. Then, at this point, with Ian downstairs paying for the taxi, She mulled over the situation long and hard before coming to a conclusion. She would have to make sure the only witness to her crime was silenced. Summoning her son and Jamie Gray into the room, she outlined her plan and watched as they both reluctantly agreed. And as Ian stepped out from paying the cab onto the curb, his heart was thumping in his chest. He knew what he needed to do, but fear kept him rooted in place. He should have known by now just to leave, run away if he had to, but with a heavy sigh, he resigned himself to his fate and began the short walk up to the apartment. Right when he stepped inside, he was immediately clobbered by a baseball bat. Pain exploded from his skull as he collapsed to the ground, barely able to register the flurry of fists and feet that followed. At this point, Tony Coyle, a 71-year-old man who lived in the next apartment, made the fatal mistake of putting his eye to the crack of his bedroom door. He wanted to know what all the clamoring voices and noise was about. And in that split second, he was spotted by the killers who moved swiftly toward him. Fear coursed through his veins as Tony scrambled back and slammed the heavy door shut, shoving the lock into place. But this would be in vain, because it was at this point that John McAlinden had an electric screwdriver and he pried his way into the door. Then with one mighty shove, Jamie Gray burst in and immediately tore into Tony, mercilessly beating and hacking away until the old man laid dead on the floor, surrounded by a pool of his own blood. After this, Jim Sweeney was rudely awakened in the small hours of October 17th by someone just pounding on his door. And when he opened it, Edith McAlinden stood there, her eyes wild with fear, and she said something terrible has happened. So she begged him to come with her to Ann Mitchell's apartment. And although disgruntled at being dragged out of bed for what appeared to be some drunken argument, Jim accompanied her nevertheless. And when they walked into Ann's apartment, Jim recoiled in shock. Everywhere that he looked, thick droplets of blood had been splattered across the walls and the ceiling, dripping freely from the drapes and furniture in an otherworldly display of carnage. His knees shook as he stumbled back to his own unit and dialed 999. The scene of horror was beyond comprehension. Forensic examination revealed the telltale signs of a brutal struggle. Shards of skull bone, clumps of hair, and swatches of skin from 3 victims strewn across the floor. Ann Mitchell just laid motionless in a pool of his own blood in the living room. Tony Coyle had been fleeing to his bedroom when he was beaten to death. Edith McAlinden sat on the couch, cradling her dead lover, pleading him to wake up amidst the carnage. And then later, she claimed to police that she had fainted during the altercation and only awoken after to find the apartment in disarray. But no one, and I mean absolutely no one, believed her story. It was clear that Edith had been there all along. I mean, the police didn't buy one word of her story. They were also sure that she had an accomplice. No one, not even the formidable Edith, could have committed such a heinous crime alone. For now, though, they couldn't prove Edith was lying and they let her go. In the meantime, the apartment was being searched for evidence. Sadly for Edith, her freedom would be short-lived. Across town at a homeless shelter, her son was bragging about the murders to Brian Gallagher. John had a terrifying story of violence to tell. With pride, he recounted the multiple murders that he had committed, claiming that those 3 men had disrespected his ma and tried to assault her. And that's when John said, "I stabbed one of the guys in the legs, man, and you should have seen it. Blood was everywhere." And Gallagher, not wanting to hear the gory details, nonetheless nodded and grunted in all the right places as John continued talking. And once free from John's presence, Gallagher quickly called the authorities with what he knew. John was soon arrested and easily gave up his friend Jamie Gray as well. The grisly triple homicide became known as the House of Blood murders and made headlines all across the UK. And the killers stood unfazed in the dock as they entered not guilty pleas during the May 2005 trial. Their callous behavior was evident, as they could be seen laughing and exchanging jokes. But their jovial demeanor soon vanished when the judge permitted for a video tour of the crime scene to be shown. The prosecutor warned the jury that the footage would be disturbing. It was a harrowing understatement of what lay ahead. So as the camera just scanned through the squalid apartment, one could immediately spot furniture thrown about haphazardly and broken bottles of alcohol strewn across the floor. But more obvious were the red-stained murder weapons: a hammer, a golf club, baseball bat, and lumps of wood, and even an electric drill. Then came images from the walls and ceiling, which resembled something out of a slaughterhouse. And finally, there was a close-up shot that revealed clumps of hair with small patches of scalp still attached, eliciting shock and disbelief from some of the jury members as they screamed out. At that moment, a brief recess was taken after the defense requested it, and upon their return, the judge received word from the defendants that they wanted to change their pleas. Now they each wanted to plead guilty, but for only one murder each. Edith would take responsibility for Dave Gillespie's death, John for Ian Mitchell's murder, and Jamie Gray for Tony Coyle's killing. The three were sentenced to life in prison, but with surprisingly low tariffs. Edith was only given 13 years, and the two minors were only given 12 years. And all three of them laughed and joked as they left the courtroom. And that's when me, Mr. E-Files, came into the courtroom, looked straight at the judge, and said, "Are you kidding me? They just murdered 3 people, and they did it with malice, and you're gonna let them go out in the streets in 12 and 13 years? I order you to change your mind." The judge then grabbed his gavel and he said, "I have no idea who you are." And I said, "I am Mystery Files, and I will cover this story in the near future, and I hope you subscribe to my channel." He said he wasn't impressed. He slammed the gavel. He told me to get out of there. I said, "All right." What? Can't win them all, folks. So at this point, Edith arrived at H.M. Prison, Cornton Vale, brimming with arrogance and a desire to be recognized as the head of the House of Blood murders. However, she soon encountered inmates just as tough as herself who expressed their utter disdain with her actions, and after a few threats were made against her, she immediately muted that attitude. And to this day, she has stayed quiet, though she has been involved in several well-known relationships within the prison walls, notably with killer chef Pamela Gurley. Doesn't it just make your blood boil when you hear something like this and you find out that they get less of a sentence than some local drug dealer? Something has got to change. Moral of the story, we need to reform some stuff, because 3 different murders by truly one mastermind, Edith, who will never be forgotten, but for the worst of ways, should be doing nothing less than life in prison. Let me know in the comments if you agree with me. That will conclude episode 2 of Hell Month. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you made it this far and you haven't left a like yet, please do that right now. Also, I got a lot of good stories coming, a lot of things that you never realized were stories that are actually true, amazing stories, and I can't wait to tell them to you. But that's all I have for you today. So, I wish you all the best. Cheers.